Welcome to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Michael Brodkorb.
And I'm Becky Scherr.
Today we are continuing a couple of conversations from the past weeks. We're going to kick off our show with our guest of the week, Jacob Millner, about the ongoing Hamas-Israeli war. Jacob is the director of the American Jewish Committee. With Jacob, we're going to break down the general impact of these attacks and this war on the Jewish community. We're going to break down the blatant anti-Semitism we are seeing at rallies, on the internet, and more. And Jacob is going to help us break down the situation differentiating Hamas and Palestine and what we can do here in Minnesota to help. We're going to move on to a different topic with a local angle, the speaker's race. We will break down how we got here and what this could mean for Minnesota's own Tom Emmer. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show. We are joined today by Jacob Millner, who is the director of the American Jewish Committee here in the United States. Jacob, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is, I can't imagine, as we were discussing before we hit record, I can't imagine what you're experiencing and what you're going through right now. And Becky and I just want to provide you an opportunity to talk about what's going on from your perspective and how we can educate our listeners about what's going on and be more supportive to your cause. So with that, I want to give you an opportunity to just take it from there.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on, Becky and Michael, and discussing this important topic. I think the most important thing to remember is that Israel and the Jewish people were victims of a mass terror attack in the past 2 weeks ago. And I think, we've heard people talk about this as Israel's 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, but it's much bigger than that. Proportional to the population, 1,400 Israelis is the equivalent of 50,000 Americans. It's one out of every 7,500 people in the country. It's a huge loss. And it's important to keep in mind that the Jewish community of the world, not the United States, not Israel, of the world, is about 16 million people. There are about as many Hispanics in California as there are Jews in the world. So basically everybody, every Jew knows or is somehow tangentially related to this catastrophe, either somebody you know or somebody you know who you know, or a relative or a friend. Half the Jewish population in the world lives in Israel. The other half lives in the United States, with other communities sprinkled, throughout the world. But of the 16 million Jews in the world, about 15 million live between Israel and the United States. So I think it's important to kind of put that into perspective, that the reach of this sort of an attack is far reaching, far beyond really, I think, what most people can really comprehend.
The details of the attacks are beyond comprehension for most people to understand. And the pain of the Jewish community is just unimaginable right now. How are you doing personally right now?
It's been a hard few weeks. It's been a very busy few weeks, as I'm sure you can imagine, with all the outreach we've been doing, all the work we've been doing internally and externally. I'm doing all right. I know people who have been affected by this. I don't have any personal relations that have been affected by this, luckily, thankfully, but I have friends that are serving, that have been called up in the IDF, who are now serving in the Army. I have friends that know people who were killed at the music festival, for example. So it's been hard. It's been a hard few weeks. It's really something that, people certainly my age have never experienced. But this was the largest murder of Jews we've seen in the world since the Holocaust, in a single day. And I think that kind of puts it in perspective as well on the magnitude of this attack, of this tragedy.
That is a difficult, Senator Coleman, when we interviewed him recently, made the same statement. And I've heard it said before, but the shock of that statement, the effect of that statement is just profound. And it has just an effect on you, what you just said. I just cannot imagine where we're at today. It's just beyond comprehension. And to understand it in the historical context that you just did, as when we heard it with Senator Coleman. It's just a very powerful statement. It's an unimaginably tragic statement, but it's just so powerful to know and to comprehend, or to try to comprehend and understand it, because what we're seeing is just beyond the words of horror.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It really is, like as you said, beyond the words of horror. It's beyond comprehension, really, to understand. This isn't, we've seen terrorist attacks. In fact, this week on Friday is the 5-year anniversary of the Pittsburgh shooting, which was on October 27th, 2018. And I think when that happened, that was obviously a horrible tragedy. 11 folks were murdered in a synagogue, the largest, the biggest attack of American Jews on American soil, and how bad and how that felt for us as a Jewish community 5 years ago. And this is magnitudes bigger, but it only shows, how real the threat is to the Jewish community. It's hard for non-Jews to really understand that the amount of money the Jewish community spends on security for synagogues, for Jewish institutions, for JCCs, for schools is astronomical. It's a huge proportion of the budget. I don't know how it is when you go to church on Sunday, but when you go to synagogue in the United States or anywhere in the world, you have to go through metal detectors. There's security guards at the door. And I think that really kind of hammers home the real threat that exists of anti-Semitism, which has been growing certainly around the world and in the United States over the past few decades. And this attack in Israel 2 weeks ago really kind of shows the world the brutality of folks that really want to kill Jews and wipe Israel off the map. You look at Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, and I know this has been said before. This isn't two countries fighting each other. This is a liberal democratic country, Israel, fighting a terrorist organization. No different than Al-Qaeda, no different than ISIS, no different than Boko Haram, or whichever one you want to choose from. But Hamas's charter says that they not only want to wipe Israel off the map, but if you read Hamas's charter, you can pull it up online. It talks about how they want to kill every Jew. It's not about Israel. It's about killing Jews and wiping the Jews off the earth. And I think that that's an important thing to understand as well. It's not it puts kind of puts this conflict in a larger context here, and I think the world is starting to wake up a little bit to that.
Since the attacks of October 7th, there has been a rise, a notable rise in anti-Semitism across the country and across the world. Just yesterday in Minneapolis, a flag of Hamas was openly flown and paraded down a street in downtown Minneapolis. A known terrorist group, Hamas. The flag was openly flown. It was horrifying and sickening to see that imagery and to see that video and to see and hear the reaction to that of the flag of Hamas in downtown Minneapolis. What can be done to help combat the rise of anti-Semitism right now?
That really, Michael, is an age-old question.
Yeah.
But I will say it's a serious question, and I don't take it lightly. You are correct. We have seen, by every metric, anti-Semitism in the United States, now I'm focusing on, has increased by degrees over the past few years. As I said, 5 years ago was the deadliest attack of Jews on American soil in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, during a Shabbat service on Saturday, October 27th, 2018. But we have seen not just violent attacks, which has also increased, Jewish people getting attacked on the streets of in Brooklyn, for example, or in New York, or in Los Angeles, kosher supermarkets or synagogues getting tagged with graffiti, people getting, punched in the street. We've seen all of these incidents rise, and the FBI reports that come out every year on hate crimes in America show us the same statistics, that the Jewish community in the United States, which is really 2% of the population, accounts for over 50% of all religious hate crimes in the United States. And it's, I think, 57%. I mean, it's a significant chunk of that of overall hate crimes. And we also know, by the way, that the FBI reports are woefully underreported. So the actual numbers, we assume, are probably much higher than the ones we're actually seeing getting reported. Um, but how do we combat anti-Semitism? There's that. I think number one is education. We really need to have people understand what anti-Semitism is. And here at the American Jewish Committee, we really have been working hard across all levels of government and all levels of society to create tools to um, help people, whether it's corporations, whether it's the government officials, whether it's schools and universities, better understand anti-Semitism and how to counteract anti-Semitism. We we leverage our global structure. What makes the American Jewish Committee unique is that we are really a global organization. So we use our global structure to work across sectors of society to help educate, government officials, like I said, universities, um, others in society to understand anti-Semitism and how to combat anti-Semitism. One thing that we've been doing is working with anti-Semitism envoys around the world. A number of countries have special envoys. The United States now has an ambassador level position dedicated to this, has had this position for several administrations. Now it's been elevated to an ambassador level. But we worked with the White House to bring a number of anti-Semitism envoys from around the world to the White House to talk about ways that we can work together to combat anti-Semitism. Another thing I just want to touch on quickly is social media. And we have been working with a number of social media companies to help them understand what anti-Semitism is, help them identify anti-Semitic content, pro-Hamas content, that terrorist type content as well, but also just more general anti-Semitic content so that they can, help to combat anti-Semitism, because we have seen I think social media has been such a way to increase the momentum of anti-Semitism and hate speech in general, that working with these companies to help them curb those effects and help them identify that has been an important thing as well.
I was prepping some questions in advance of
Mhm.
this, and I wrote that question out, and it was just horrible that I had to
Mhm.
write that question to you. That in this day and age, that was a question I would be asking today on
Mhm.
this podcast. It just seems there is what can be done to combat anti-Semitism right now? It's just, I sound almost juvenile for asking it, but my intent is sincere. I know Becky's intent is
Mhm.
sincere. What can we do to be helpful? What can we do to stop
So
this? And just,
the American Jewish Committee has published for the past 4 or 5 years a report on the state of anti-Semitism in the United States. And 90+% of Jews in the United States view anti-Semitism today as a serious problem in this country. It's 90%. And the fact that 90% of anybody anywhere agrees on something
yeah.
in this day and age shows how pervasive a problem it is. One of the things, though, that we have seen in our surveys is that really meeting Jews, understanding Jews is an important part of the discussion here. And I think, you know, there aren't that many Jews in the United States. It's 2% of the population, and a lot of it is concentrated in certain geographical areas, certain metropolitan areas. Having people, especially if they don't live in communities where you have a large number of Jews, really, meet Jewish neighbors, understand Jewish traditions, understand Jewish customs, understand, your neighbors does show that people that have those relationships really do have a better understanding of anti-Semitism and has a better understanding of identifying anti-Semitism and standing up to anti-Semitism. So one of the things I would recommend it to your listeners is to really reach out to your Jewish neighbors. I can tell you that the Jewish community in this country feels isolated right now. I know that I've heard from friends that aren't Jewish. I've heard from neighbors and colleagues, and it's wonderful. But a lot of people are feeling alone, and they're feeling that they're not, all the work that we do as a community to reach out to other communities and through allyships and interreligious work and interfaith work, we feel we're not necessarily seeing it back. And I think that would be an important thing to your listeners. If you have Jewish friends, Jewish colleagues, Jewish acquaintances, neighbors, reach out, just see how they're doing. Like I said, the tragedy in Israel really does affect the Jewish community on a scale just because, you think that your Jewish neighbor living in Minnesota, is far removed from Israel. My guess is that person actually isn't, that they know somebody or they're somehow affected by this. And I would recommend that reaching out is a very important kind of first step in understanding the Jewish community and even in combating anti-Semitism. But can I just get back to one thing you said earlier, Michael, which is
Yes.
the Hamas flag in Minneapolis? Um, I can't imagine after 9/11 someone driving down the streets of Minneapolis, for example, with an Al Qaeda flag or a Taliban flag. I think that not only is that deeply disturbing on a number of levels, obviously. I think it also speaks to your other point on anti-Semitism, is that the Jewish community feels scared and under siege right now, and to have somebody, and I realize that there's free speech, you're free to do whatever you want, but just because you have the freedom of speech doesn't mean you have a freedom of no consequence. And I really do hope that people of humanity and people of good conscience see that and really do call those sorts of acts out, because it's not just an anti-Semitic, anti-democratic, it's anti everything that we believe in. Hamas is a terrorist organization that does not believe in anything that, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're left, right, or center. I guarantee you that the ideology of Hamas is not the ideology that we would want to be promoting in the United States or anywhere in the world.
You're correct. I want to just add a little backstory. I saw the video yesterday, was horrified by it. And I wanted just to add one additional personal story. When I worked at the legislature in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a Klan rally, a neo-Nazi rally at the state capitol in Minnesota. I remembered I worked for the Senate. I remember the offices were closed. I think it was a Saturday. The offices were closed. They told us to stay away. I was doing some press work and other work. I was there that day because the Republican Party of Minnesota was working with some coalition groups to do some type of unity event in the state capitol afterwards. I remember being at the state capitol and seeing a Nazi flag, and it was terrifying to see a Nazi flag being flown by supporters proudly and openly. That image stuck with me, and the pure hatred that was exhibited by those people in flying that flag. That is exactly how I felt yesterday. I want to connect those two events. What I saw when that neo-Nazi rally was at the Capitol, where people were openly embracing and openly flying the Nazi flag. And then yesterday to see in downtown Minneapolis, someone openly on an ATV to the cheers of the crowd flying a flag of Hamas. It is simply sickening. It is beyond words. It is un-American, un-Minnesotan. I respect and appreciate the rights of people who have their First Amendment rights. But I got every First Amendment right to say it's appalling, it's disgusting, and it shouldn't be allowed. And the fact that someone was able to freely navigate downtown Minneapolis in that crowd with the flag of Hamas, and they were not called out for it, that I'm aware of in any substantive way, is simply appalling. And it is a mark on all Minnesotans, regardless of where you stand, that the flag of a known terrorist group was openly flown in downtown Minneapolis in our state in October of 2023. We should all be ashamed for that.
I agree with you, Michael. And I also want to just add one more thing here, which is what we're seeing right now is Israel fighting Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. This is not Israel fighting the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a conflict that needs to be resolved. I fully understand that, but Hamas, which has been ruling Gaza since 2007, keep in mind Israel left Gaza, fully disengaged from Gaza in 2005. Hamas then took it over in a violent coup against the Palestinian Authority in 2007. And since 2007, Hamas has been ruling Gaza with an iron fist. And I really think that we need to think about, you know, the people of Gaza are really victims of Hamas terrorists as well, not just the Israelis that have to endure the rockets and obviously the most recent attacks against by Hamas. But the people of Gaza are also victims here of Hamas, and I think that that's important to keep in mind that innocent Palestinians have been killed and will suffer because of the actions of Hamas. And to your point, Michael, that someone would feel the need or feel the desire or feel the urge to drive around Minneapolis or anywhere with a Hamas flag really is, like you said, it's the same thing as running around with a Nazi flag. It's beyond the pale of decent society, and I think we all need to be condemning these actions to remember that there's certain things that are over the line, and that support of any sort of terrorist organization, and I don't really care what terrorist organization it is. I don't think anybody would. I think we would have the same conversation if someone was driving with an Al Qaeda or ISIS flag. um, we need to condemn that, and we need to remember our humanity and remember that Hamas is also um, keeping the people of Gaza hostage as well. And I really do hope that at the end of this conflict, and that's well above my pay grade is this conflict, but I really do hope that there will be an effort to kind of root out Hamas and figure out a way to move forward with actual leadership for the Palestinian people.
And I think that is a really important distinction. This is a war on Hamas. It's not a war on
Mhm,
Palestine. And you have said publicly that you want, quote, peace for Israelis and Jews and
mhm.
Muslims and Palestinians. Is there anything that we can do here locally, as non-Jewish Americans, to help promote and share that message and help distinguish? I think it's a really important thing that you just said. I think not necessarily what people are hearing, and what can we do to help share and promote that this is truly against Hamas, not
No,
Palestine.
absolutely. I think that first of all, it's important to distinguish, like I said, that or for people to be able to distinguish between Hamas and Palestinians. And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is certainly a deep-rooted conflict and a conflict that will continue to have to be negotiated toward a resolution. But uh, it is unquestionable that Israel cannot have a terrorist organization that threatens its citizens, right on the border. I mean, literally, like, like the border between Edina and Minneapolis. Imagine if you had like Hamas on one side of that border, trying to launch attacks on the Minneapolis side. It's an untenable situation for any country in the world, and no country in the world, by the way, I think other than Israel, has it really ever asked to try to restrain itself to protect its citizens. I can't think of any other country that is under the immense pressure that Israel's always under, to protect its citizens and at the same time also restrain itself in a way that will kind of seek international approval. Um, but I think to your question, Becky, which is a very good question, is first and foremost, I think making sure that the Jewish community feels good and feels safe and secure is important, but also to understand the Muslim community in this country as well, by the way, is also experiencing an uptick in Islamic phobia. We saw a terrible attack of a child in Illinois and Chicago last week. I know that the Biden administration is working with both the Jewish and the Muslim communities to work on security. Um, so helping people to understand, or working with the Jewish and the Muslim and the non-Jewish, the Christian communities as well, to really understand the situation, to really understand that, to be promoting, honest stories, the stories that tell the truth about the situation and don't inflame the conflict, I think is important. We saw some very shoddy reporting last week with that hospital that was unfortunately bombed in Gaza. All the major media outlets in the West, major media outlets that are the papers of record in the United States and around the world, reported it as an Israeli strike, which very quickly inflamed tensions, not just in Israel and in the West Bank, but you saw, protests in the United States and in Europe, in Beirut, toward the American embassy in Jordan. And I think it's important. It was later, obviously, you know, discerned that it was a failed launch of a Palestinian Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that had hit the hospital. And I think it's important that we make sure that the stories that we're sharing are verified, they're truthful, that there's been good and accurate reporting, because without that safeguard, we really risk inflaming an already inflamed situation, and it makes it dangerous for Jews and Muslims, and in the United States and around the world.
Now, when it comes to this war and also just the um, plight of the Jewish people in general, where can people turn to? I mean, I want you one to plug your own social and your committee's website and social as well. But some of the things that you were talking about, just educating ourselves. I had no idea that most synagogues have metal detectors. I've never had to. I've worked at the Capitol. I've worked at
Mhm.
worked in Congress, and yes, have had to walk through that to go, in a place where a bunch of elected leaders are. I don't have to do that to go to church. So where can we find out more of this to just educate? As again, we want to be allies here. We want to know how we can educate ourselves and educate others. But where can we find some of this stuff? Obviously, mainstream media isn't always um, the best thing to turn to, especially in something like this where there's the both sides issue and all of this Palestine versus Israel individual opinions of some reporters. Are there places aside from some place like the American Jewish Committee that we can turn to, or is your organization a good place for us to
No,
start?
listen, I think the American Jewish Committee is certainly one of the best. We've been around for 117, 118 years. And I think that, we have very good reporting and very good resources. Like I said, we have not just 25 American offices, but 13 international offices, including an office in Israel. We have a very large contingent working in Israel right now, including those who are serving in the IDF. So, obviously the American Jewish Committee, ajc.org, is a wonderful resource. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at AJC Global on Twitter, and we have a lot of our experts, myself included, on Twitter. You're welcome to follow us, and we share material that's been curated and that has been verified, and that we take a lot of pride in having good information. Locally in Minnesota, there's other great resources. The Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas is an excellent resource as well, as is the Minneapolis and St. Paul Jewish Federations. I think all of those are excellent places to go for information as well.
We want to be incredibly sensitive of what you're experiencing right now, but we wanted to have you on to talk. We wanted to give you an opportunity just to talk to our listeners. We want to be as helpful as we can be, and I want you to know that you can rely on us. If something that comes up, you need a platform, or if there's something that we can promote and discuss related to what's going on right now, we want to be advocates for knowing that you are seen. We're with you. We want to be helpful. We want you to be safe, everyone in your community to be safe. We want the state of Israel to be safe. We want this to be resolved in a way that allows Jews to exist, Israel to exist freely and openly in this world. And if there's something that, it sounds trite again, it sounds glib, but if there's something that Becky and I can do on this podcast to help give a voice to that, to what you're experiencing, what you're going through, please know that you can rely on us at any point.
I appreciate that. And it really does mean a lot, not just to me personally, but I know to the Jewish community in Minnesota, in the United States, and around the world, that we have friends and allies like yourself who are willing to speak with us, to hear our stories, and to really advocate on our behalf. Because as I said, ultimately there's not that many Jews in the world. The Jewish population of the world, I believe, in 2023 actually just reached its pre-Holocaust levels. So we're talking 78 years out. And having allies like yourself, people of good conscience, from all religions, from all sectors, from all countries, is the most important thing for us right now. So, keep sending your good thoughts and your prayers, and, anything you can do to your Jewish friends, your Jewish neighbors, to support the United States and Israel alliance, which is extremely important. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Jacob Millner with the director of the American Jewish Committee here in the United States. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us today under
Thank
these
you for
difficult
having me.
circumstances. And we hope to speak to you again, hopefully under better circumstances.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Becky, we just spoke with Jacob Millner, the director at the American Jewish Committee. Your perspective.
I think it was really enlightening. I think I've discovered a lot over the last couple of weeks. How little I really know about the issues between the Palestinians and Israelis, the horrific anti-Semitism that really has been existing. Ignorant to me, I just have been a little shocked. And so I've been really immersing myself to learn more throughout all of this. And I think Jacob really hit on some things that I think are really good for our listeners to know as well. I think it's just so sad and horrifying that what the Jewish people here in America and across the country have to endure, like to just go to synagogue and to have to go through mags is because of your safety, the safety that they have to invest in for their schools and just to live and survive because there is such a hatred of who they are as a people is horrifying. Again, I think some of the numbers that he threw out, the comparison to both the Hispanic population in California and, that this would be equivalent to 50,000 Americans being murdered in one day is it just really opens my eyes to the scale of this. Obviously, I knew it was horrific. Obviously, we've been watching these atrocities happen and it's just been disgusting and heartbreaking and everything. But I was really grateful that he was here to educate me and our listeners and just have that conversation because I think it really is important. And I think as we discussed, wanting to be advocates and to be allies and to do what we can for the Jewish Americans in our lives, in our communities. I thought it was really helpful to hear what he had to say in a different perspective from somebody who obviously lives and breathes this, but also is his career. Yeah, it was just very enlightening to me.
I can't imagine. I have no frame of reference and in a sense of understanding as to what he and other members of the Jewish community are experiencing right now. It has been very difficult to see not only the raw images of what happened on October 7th, the fallout from that, but also I think the institutional anti-Semitism that I have seen time and time again since this happened. It has been simply appalling and shocking. And yesterday on social media, seeing the flag of Hamas being paraded down a street in downtown Minneapolis, it is something that I will, again, I'm a big advocate of the First Amendment. There's a number of things that you can do well within your rights of the First Amendment to speak out and be in opposition to that. And the flag of a terrorist group was paraded. I was saying before we recorded it, it looked like a parade. I mean, it literally looked like a parade for Hamas in downtown Minneapolis. People were cheering and there was crowds and someone was driving an ATV with the flag of Hamas trailing by. People were giving thumbs up. There was cheering going on. It was just appalling. And for some reason, there is a disconnect right now between people. Jacob was spot on. In the days after 9/11, to think that the flag of the Taliban or that type of event were to occur in downtown Minneapolis, it would not have occurred. It just simply wouldn't have. And I think that a number of people, I think, first of all, let me say, all Minnesotans need to be shocked and appalled by what occurred yesterday in Minneapolis. I think it is incumbent upon all of our elected leaders to speak out about what happened yesterday. And there are a number of people that need to take account and reflect on why someone felt that free and comfortable driving the flag of Hamas behind an ATV in downtown Minneapolis on a beautiful autumn day. I will say to you that I bet you the introduction of the Jewish flag would have created more controversy at that event than the flag of Hamas. And we as Minnesotans need to speak out about that. And it's just horrific. And I appreciate him coming on so much and talking to us. It is I can't imagine, an incredibly difficult time, an unimaginable difficult time. And what we're trying to do on our podcast is get voices that can speak. We wanted him to speak from his perspective on it, and we're going to continue to do that with all of our guests. But it was just really important to give, I think, a very strong statement today of support for Jews, the state of Israel, and to allow someone like Jacob with his credentials and title, the organization that he represents, to come on and put a voice to this, because it's what our listeners need to hear. It's what Minnesotans need to hear. It's what the world needs to hear. And I'm appreciative that we've created this space once again to allow guests like him to come on, and I hope we continue doing it.
Agreed. And, anytime we can talk to somebody that it opens my eyes and educates me as well as a personal point of privilege. So I'm very grateful for that time with Jacob this morning.
Becky, we want to spend a few minutes pivoting to our next topic, which is the possibility that Tom Emmer, Congressman Tom Emmer from Minnesota, may be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. We are recording this on a Monday. We will be releasing it on a Tuesday. As of now, Congressman Emmer is one of 9 candidates that is seeking the speakership. We've had a number of, first of all, we've talked about Congressman Emmer and been advocates of Tom Emmer for very long on this podcast. We had him as a guest in July. He was talking about his role as the House Majority Whip. In the time since he was on, Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker of the House of Representatives. We had David Fitzsimmons, who works for Congressman Finstead, on to give his perspective and his take on that. And I don't believe that any of us would have thought that when we interviewed David Fitzsimmons that we would not have a speaker yet, or that we would be talking about the possibility of Tom Emmer being a member of Congress, but being the speaker. And so, Becky, I want to give you an opportunity. You worked for Congressman Emmer for 3 years in Washington. I want to give our listeners, just lay that groundwork and recognize you are a subject matter expert on someone who may be third in line for the presidency. I want to get your take as to what your perspective is on that, and inform our listeners.
Yeah, well, said it before, I'll say it again. Big Team Emmer fan here. I first worked for him in 2010 on his gubernatorial campaign. Shout out Jeff Kolb for using the word gubernatorial right there. And then spent 3 years in Washington as his communications director, his first 3 years. So he got elected. I went out there and had the privilege of setting up his office and getting, hitting the ground running there. It is even crazy just to think, him starting in 2015, we're 8 years later, and just how much changes from a freshman 8 years ago. I will start by saying, Tom Emmer has always been a big relationship guy. He was a whip at the state legislature when he worked there here in Minnesota. Building connections and building relationships has always been something he has done in his personal life and professional life, and something he has really made a priority of. So starting, in the office, David Fitzsimmons, who we had on, was his chief of staff when I started as well, and really emphasize that within the staff as well. So staff would connect with other staff if there were special elections with Republicans getting elected, opening up their new offices. We would reach out to our fellows, person in the same level of title as us to help them, give them any tips or tricks that we've learned, and Emmer would reach out to the member. He started rising in the ranks very quickly. Deputy whip, when an opportunity on an A committee, there's 4 A committees in Congress, when an opportunity on the finance committee opened up, he campaigned for that, got placed in that, and very quickly among leadership, there was obviously a good relationship within leadership for this, new up and coming freshman member. And then since that, over the years, we've watched him come over to the NRCC and really work with electing Republicans across the country. So this is times where he's traveled to states, he's raised money for different candidates. He has done things with them personally, educating, mentoring. And I just want to bring in here a little bit of within those connections at the NRCC. In 2022, he helped raise $9.2 million for House races. He's already helped raise almost $8 million for the 2024 cycle. And these are things that he is able to tout now in his speakership race. Now, obviously, there has been a number of different candidates that have put their hat in the ring and have since dropped out. And Emmer has always been somebody who has been big on seniority, and so those were folks, Scalise, being one of them that was kind of ahead of him in line. Now, we also watched Emmer be named when Gates and others were trying to take down, McCarthy as somebody that they saw as a potential, replacement, and so, I think he is well poised to be the nominee. I think that personally, my thoughts and opinions of Tom Emmer, I think he would be great. It's a tough position to be in, but, I think that in his last, 8 years in Congress, he's really worked to build these relationships across all factions and, all sides of the Republican Party and Republican conference out there. So I think that that's gonna bode well for his bid. We will find out tonight, as you mentioned, we're recording on Monday. There's an internal candidate forum debate of sorts, tonight, Monday evening, and 9 a.m. Tuesday is when they're gonna so after this is out, we might have some more information about who comes out of that internal conference nominating session and potentially a vote.
Yeah, I should disclose to our listeners, our plan is, depending on the outcome, we may have a bonus episode covering this topic more later this week, but I wanted an opportunity to once again cement and establish Becky's connection, her work experience with Congressman Emmer. Becky has done something I have not had the opportunity to do, which is work out in Washington. And her experience and her knowledge of Congress and her working relationship with Congressman Emmer, I think, is going to be an insight that we're going to tap into. I wanted to ask you, Becky, I think that Congressman Emmer, we had him on in July, and I think I had not spoken to him in a while. He just looked fantastic. He was peppy. He just great visuals. He was energetic, on message, great talking points. We released that interview. I re-released it. We released it over the weekend, and it's just a great interview. And you can hear him talk about the dynamic of the team. And it was incredibly insightful to hear his perspective back then, but also look at it now in light of the events that are happening. You are an advocate of Tom Emmer. You're a fan of Tom Emmer. You're friends with Tom Emmer. Do you want him to become the speaker? And the caveat on that question is this. Right now, there's a bit of a feeding frenzy going on. And the last Republican speakers of the House have not, there's a real feeding frenzy going on right now. What do you think about that frenzy? Do you want Emmer to get it? And do you think he can keep, if he gets it, can he come out of this process ahead?
That is a loaded question. I will start by saying, again, I think that he, out of the 9 candidates in the currently that are in the quote unquote race for speaker, I guess, um, I think that he is best set up for it. I think he is best equipped for it. I think he will do the best job. I think it is a tricky place to be. I think that he has done very well for himself, moving over to be the chair of the NRCC, coming back and being the majority whip. I think he has done a very good, had a very good, thoughtful approach to his time in Congress. Now, I think Emmer is also, I just want to put this with a caveat of all my time working for Tom Emmer, he is one of the good guys. He is one of the guys that really, truly wants to make a difference and wants to do it for the betterment of conference, for the betterment of the conference, for the betterment of the American people. I don't think he ever was one that, started to run for governor to have power and fame. I don't think that was his role when he was running for Congress. And I don't think that's been his desire when ascending these ranks. So I think that's something that I would like to make clear from my personal interactions and relationship with Tom Emmer. That said, I think it's a crappy spot to be in. I think it is, like you mentioned, it's a feeding frenzy. We saw this a little bit with Speaker Ryan when he was kind of pushed into the speakership when Boehner resigned a number of years ago. He was the one, the golden boy that everybody wanted up there. He did eventually reluctantly step up, and he did his job, and I think he did it well. But I think after that, he was like, I wash my hands with this. It's kind of like a very thankless position. You get you get all the ire of everybody, all the arrows pointed at you. And it's a lot. And so to go into this mid Congress when there's so much going on, there's so many heightened different factions and groupings, and now we're going to be leading into a presidential year. It's a really unfortunate spot to be in. but I am hopeful and optimistic that he can rise above. And because he does have that kind of coach mentality and team mentality, even Gates has, been in interviews saying, Emmer is somebody that you might not like always like what he has to say, but he's going to be frank and speak the truth with you. And I do think that there is not a lot of that in Washington all the time, and I think there is a respect for that. So if he's able to navigate that, and kind of that frankness and openness with these members, I hope that that's a little bit different than some of their frustrations they had with McCarthy and other leaders. So, I don't know if I kind of really answered your
You
question.
did.
I think he would be great. I think it's a crappy spot to be in, but here we are.
As you remember, after we interviewed Congressman Emmer, I left that episode pretty charged up. We, in fact, had to edit some of my language out because I was so excited about the interview that we had with him. Here's my take. If Tom Emmer wants to be the Speaker of the House, I'm all for it. My only concern is that he's going to be in an environment where he's not going to be able to succeed. I absolutely believe if there's one person in Washington who can right this ship, who can get everyone rowing in the same direction, it's Tom Emmer. I believe he's qualified. I believe he can do it. I think he's perfect for the job. My only concern is that the skills that Tom Emmer has as a leader, as a coach, his interpersonal skills will not be rewarded in this environment. And that's my only concern, is that the caucus, that there is so much infighting, that there is so much of a food fight going on, that I don't want to see Tom Emmer spit out the other side. But there's absolutely no question in my mind that he is qualified, he is able, he would be a fantastic speaker. And it's just remarkable to think about. If you just think about that, we're talking about Tom Emmer being third in line for the presidency, Speaker of the House. And I think both of our concerns, or both of our kind of asterisks on it are, he's qualified, he can do it, but we just don't want to see him get spit out the other side. And that's just what I want to make sure happens. There's just been this buzzsaw mentality, this internal fighting that's been going on in the House conference. And I hate to see Tom Emmer get bloodied by that anymore. And if they're looking for someone who can unite and lead, my goodness, I cannot think of a better candidate than Tom Emmer. But I just don't want to be in a situation where he's Kevin McCarthy 6 months down the road, or I'm sorry, Kevin McCarthy a month down the road, or 2 months down the road, or 6 months down the road. I just want to make sure that the election of Emmer as Speaker, that he's in a situation to succeed, because there's no stopping him if he's the leader and if he's the Speaker of the House. And that's my only reservation. But boy, oh boy, talk about the system finally working and giving the good guys, letting the good guys win. And Tom Emmer is a good guy. And particularly after speaking with July, after we spoke with him in July, I couldn't have been more of an advocate and said it on the air. And I hope he's victorious. We're going to watch the process. And Becky, I want to thank you for once again leading that and giving us analysis and discussion on your perspective on it. Our plan is, if you're amenable to this, is we will park more of our discussion about this process, and we're going to tack it into a bonus episode because we're going to watch the vote. Again, we're releasing this on a Monday. They're going to be a Q&A tonight. The conference vote tomorrow, and there potentially may be a speaker vote tomorrow. So we're prepared, and we're going to be ready to jump online and record a bonus episode for your reaction. And Becky, you'll be leading that once again.
I can't wait. I mean, it's just Tom Emmer from Delano, Minnesota. Who would have thought? How it's just insane, incredible, exciting, and yeah, we'll
gonna be great.
chat more soon.
Yes. Now, on a topic you're not leading about, a topic that you continue to disappoint at your own personal peril, your professionalism is fantasy football, fantasy pick'em league. Becky, what's your excuse this week? First of all, I got to clarify: did you pick this week?
Sure
Because
did.
based on the results, I don't know that you did.
So I did. I will start by
You
saying
did pick.
I did pick.
Okay.
I will start by saying it's a rough week across the board. Let's zoom out for a second. Wow. Some wild games here. So I will say Bravo to you. You are leading this week. You have 6 correct. I have 4 correct. So you are the top of our league for this week. I am at the bottom of our league for this week. But in comparison, last week you had 9 right and I had 12 right. 3 times. I mean, it is just like roller coaster ride of a week here. So I got no real excuses except for these teams just need to do better. So that will be my yeah, that's about all I got this week. I mean, man, it was some rough football watching this weekend.
No, I feel very comfortable where I'm in. Your excuses aside, I feel very comfortable where I am right now. I'm leading right now. I got a
Mhm.
game day decision to make about the Vikings game where my pick comes in. That's
Mm.
going to be closer to the game. I'm going to be going there tonight to watch the game. I'll be with my daughter tonight at the
Ooh.
game. Monday Night Football, San Francisco 49ers at home at US Bank. Becky, I feel very good because independent of where I go tonight, I could be up. I could potentially I have a 2-game lead right now,
Yeah.
so I'm guaranteed to pick up a game on you.
Yep, at
And
least
so
one.
your slow
You're
and
right.
steady is certainly more slow than steady right now.
Got lots of weeks left.
There's a lot of football. We're not even at the halfway point yet.
Yeah. I also want to take this opportunity to explain that I have a horrific cold, so this is the excuse for my voice. And also, just that last week we did not touch on football picks. It felt weird and odd, and we're trying to be sympathetic to the environment of our show when making sure we're doing that. But I'm coming for you, so I'm just gonna say, watch out. There's still time. Just not my week.
There was, yes, in the interest of transparency and having a good professional relationship with you, there was a lot of end zone dancing last episode by you, but we decided because of the interview with Senator Coleman and the subject matter that that the transition from speaking to Senator Coleman about the terrorist attacks in Israel to our Pick'em League was not as smooth of a transition as we thought. So we decided to withhold that. But I do want to disclose that Becky was throwing the heat. That audio may be released at a later point, maybe in a best of. But there was a lot of gloating, and I would say well-deserved gloating because you did. If
Game
I'm being fair,
3.
if I'm fair, you were the point leader last week. You got 12 last week, just to make sure. So if that audio would have been released, there would have been a lot of gloating and well-deserved gloating because
Yeah.
you did have the lead.
But to go from 12 right last week to 4 right this week is
Yeah,
pretty damaging to my psyche right now.
yeah, and as it should be. But you did have some gains. I want to note the points on the board and be accurate and fair.
I would like to close the show with 1 point of personal privilege.
Oh boy.
So as folks might remember, over the summer when Michael came back after his brief stint away, he graced me and Jeff Kolb with wonderful gifts, and one of mine was a gift card to Dairy Queen for the ice cream cake that I couldn't stop talking about and craving during my pregnancy. So it was my husband's birthday last week, and we got a ice cream cake. And here's the best story of it. I ordered online, trying to order ahead like a good person, go to pick it up. They don't have my order, which is fine. It wasn't customized. I just wanted a cake. So I'm like, I'll just take one out of the freezer. And they're like, well, we don't have any more of the peanut butter cup ones anymore, or any of the small ones, just sold that. So we'll give you a large peanut butter cup one for the price of a small. I've been eating ice cream cake like every day for like 10 days right now.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is great for my appetite. It is not great for the fact that I'm getting married in 6 weeks, but priorities are eating ice cream cake at this point.
Well, I'm glad. You were very deserving of that ice cream cake. I'm glad you were able to partake in it and get a little extra. That's wonderful.
Whoop, whoop.
That's the best type of gift to give then, okay?
It was great.
Becky, I want to thank you again for another good week, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Bye.
We want to thank you for the support for the breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. Before we go, be sure to jump over to the platform wherever you listen to this podcast and give us a review. You can also leave a review on our website at bbreakpod.com. You can find us at Twitter at bbreakpod. And the big breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky will return next week. Thanks all.